revolution starts now.
Because I'm still teaching. And I don't know what may come up that day. But I told her that I would try to be there, but don't put 1 pound. If I get there and need a substitute, I'll always be there. But I can't make that commitment. Our enrollment has dropped tremendously at campus, and you just don't want to take a chance.
He's a wanted man. He's a wanted man.
That's right.
Always saying
like,
wanted about a black man is not a good thing, right? He's a desirable figure. How about that? Is that better?
I like that.
Desirable, not wanted.
Not wanted man.
Put a poster up for him.
But did you hear?
Work on our sensitivity
the police
starting
chief's
now.
son in California.
What's that?
A police chief, the African American police chief in California. His son and another friend attacked that.
Yeah.
Had it on film.
Attacked what?
They attacked a young, I don't know whether it was young or old, but the police chief, his son, who's African American, attacked that shit. We call it shit. That was called it.
Oh, Sikh?
Sikh,
yeah.
Oh my God.
Person this morning. They saw him knock him down.
Can I
They saw him
make
kick
one
him.
request?
Uh-huh.
And you probably would get it right anyway. But since almost no one else does.
No, that's all right.
The name of the organization of which I am a
Yes.
part is Tri-Community Mediation. Not Tri-County.
Right,
not
right.
meditation.
Well, I know if it's going through. All right. Okay, right. So it's the Tri-Community Mediation Center. Center?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, or just Tri-Community Mediation,
Okay.
which is a mediation center.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your position there? You're the director or
Executive.
Graham Suba.
executive director?
No way.
honcho.
You guys.
Head honcho.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we
Big
definitely.
cheese,
Yeah, unless you're
Executive
vegan, in which
director.
case
Oh,
big
okay.
tofu or I don't know.
Big tofu. That sounds like a cabal of vegetarians.
The first falafel.
That sounds dangerously like kerfuffle.
Right.
I
We don't want
thought
that.
she was a
Oh no!
college student.
Oh no!
No,
Just
she's
young.
Now,
Oh, she told me.
guys.
She got it clear.
She
She made it clear.
Are they getting that
She's
gin yet?
Don't
like,
embarrass me.
she had to grow up.
Yeah,
This
she
is
told-
what happened.
Aww. And this is what happened.
That's right. Hey, it's like they get it right because the college students, man, they get there, they're about ready to graduate and tell them, well, now you're going to have to grow up. It's like, oh, I don't know.
It's a real bummer.
It's
Yeah.
so funny to me. My daughter said, my 14-year-old,
Oh,
who's doing.
was that my friend?
No, she's
That's the other
16
one.
now.
Oh, she's 16 now.
And she's like 5'10". If she didn't look so much like everybody else, you'd think there'd been a mix-up in the nursery. I don't even know. My people aren't even that tall. Like we're a very moderate height. Anyway, no, Fiona. It was not
Okay.
Fiona. It was Madeline, who's
Okay.
14,
Okay.
and she's off to just cheerleading and band. She's doing. That's her 9th grade year in high school. And this morning she looked at me and she was like, I said, I got to get going. I have this radio thing I'm doing. She said, what are you going to wear? I said, it's radio. Did you hear me? So she's going to be so pleased with herself when I tell her that. It was also filmed. She said, she told me, she picked this dress out. She goes, I still think you should wear this.
Yeah,
You
she
look
told
really good in it. And, you'll be able to feel that when you're talking.
There you go.
What the heck is that about? 14. Now,
Well-
Fiona probably was 14 when
No,
you
she-
met her.
Was she?
13 or 14. When they went through that training.
Well, you sure?
Maybe 13.
Yeah.
That was rich.
Well, she's only a year away from knowing
Delegate
everything.
seat,
Smartest
38A.
smartest entity in the universe.
58.
15-year-old.
I know. She already has the... When she gets ready to say something, she's... Never mind.
Yeah.
Like, you're just so dumb. Why
I
would
don't have the patience for you.
It would be so lost on you. Why
Oh, that little tidbit of cruelty there, that was nice.
Well, I forget that I met with a couple poacher farmers last night.
Oh, good. Okay.
Small. Oh, yeah. It went well.
Okay.
It went well. So I still have a few friends in the poacher. As a matter of fact, they even agree with me.
Well, you have to be satisfied with the fact that the people that are going to support you on this particular issue only encompass that group of people who breathe.
And guess who asked for me yesterday at a meeting? Jim Perdue.
Really?
Yeah. I had a meeting last night at the Showbird Stadium with the organization I'm with. And the chairman works at Purdue,
Uh-huh.
and let me know that Jim Purdue asked for me yesterday. So I think I'll go by this afternoon and get an appointment with him.
Interesting.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Since he asked for me, so
The opening. There's an opening.
I'm going to take advantage of it.
Amen.
Takes a tough man to
That's
take a
right.
tender meeting.
Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
If
Wow.
not him, at least a representative. So I was going to take a shot at it. See, they get to have earphones.
Yeah, we'll never know how we sound.
That's how you know whether you rank or not.
Clearly. How's your wife?
She's due for another surgery sometime soon. She's fighting it.
What's she think about all this politicking happening?
She's happy I'm busy, so I don't have to worry about getting on her for what she didn't do when I told her.
Yeah, she's
I
not
take
always
care of
good
stuff.
about self-care and managing her stuff.
She was always worried,
Worried about
again,
somebody, all the kids.
That's it.
I know.
Always there and other people. Yeah.
It's tough to get out of that. You
Yeah, I
know
know.
what? It's been a lifetime.
I know. She's been 36 years.
Which is what you love about her, like how much she's that radical hospitality you guys have always practiced, radical
When she got
generosity.
injured in 2011, I said, baby, you need to take your time and heal before you. I got to go. I said, no, you need to heal. But she was fussing this morning, so she's in good shape. I've not been male shoulders now, just.
Do you want me to call you Dr. Hall?
Huh?
Do you want me to refer to you as Dr. Hall on you?
That's what'll make you happy. Call me, just don't call me late for dinner.
I want to know what you want.
In the next few days, it'll be the one-year anniversary of the White Nationalist Rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, that took the life of Heather Heyer. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. The sight of Nazi flags and the Tiki Torchlight March that reminded one of the 1930s Germany has now passed into history, but the alt-right is still here. Clashes at a recent rally in Portland, Oregon. There will be no march by them in Charlottesville this year, but alt-right leader Jason Kessler has vowed to press on with a rally in Washington, D.C. this Sunday to mark the anniversary. Take a look at where we are in our studio this morning. Kirkland Hall, the former president of the local NAACP branch, as well as now running as a candidate, a Democrat, for the delegate seat in Maryland's District 38A. And also Michelle Ennis with the Tri-Community Mediation here in Salisbury. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So first of all, I'll start with you, with Kirkland. What are your thoughts here on the anniversary of this event that took everyone by surprise, I think, in some fashion, and of course we had the president's response and everything that sort of followed from that. Where do you think we are a year from?
Well, personally, I think the members or the organizers and individuals that participate in that event are a little more emboldened now. Quite sure they're a little apprehensive a year ago how the public would respond. But once they got from the President of the United States, I'm quite sure they feel emboldened, just like many of others in this country, that they could do and say anything regardless of who it impact or who it hurt. And I think the level of what I want to say meanness, and I don't like to use this term hatred, that has permeated this country now, I think it's escalating at a rapid pace.
Michelle, what are your thoughts a year out?
I agree, unfortunately, with Kirkland, and I think there's rising. I mean, I think there's a rising tide, and I don't think it's limited to the white supremacist movement. I think there's a rising tide of an unwillingness to stand it any longer. I think it's, if we look at a full spectrum, I think the polar ends of a spectrum, perhaps, who would be inclined towards coming to arms with one another are definitely increasing. I also think that folks in the middle who perhaps have the prerogative of remaining detached and somewhat oblivious are uncomfortable in ways that are now undeniable and really compelling us to ask tough questions about what then are we to do.
How did we get here? We went from the first African American president to now Donald Trump, who clearly has appealed to the racist end of the political spectrum. What changed? And I mean, are we looking at simply that this feeling in this particular portion of the population has been there all the time and simply risen to the top, or at least to our public consciousness, or is there something? Do you think there's something more mobilizing going on that's growing rather than necessarily coming to the surface?
I think we have to go back a little further than President Barack Obama. If we go back to the Civil War, how families were divided, the North and the South. Then you fast forward to the Civil Rights Movement, how a division again in this country. Then there was a Brown versus Board of Education back in 1954 where schools had been integrated. And there were laws and policies forced on people. And even today we have individuals still resentful that happened. Then there was affirmative action. People felt that they were being pushed over, especially the white population, felt that they were giving away jobs and opportunities they felt that they were entitled to. Then President Barack Obama came aboard. Again, African-American president, the first one, and there was quite a few people, especially I think the older generation, that resented the fact that we had a black president. And there were some who said he was not our president. Now, fast forward to Donald Trump, who's bombastic, who will say anything, who will denigrate any people, especially women and people of color. You call them dumb, you call them low IQ, and those are code words that some people just rally to. And now, as Michelle just mentioned, I'm afraid that there's going to be some violence because there are people that are resistant, feel that the government is not helping them. They have to take actions in their own hands, and that's what I'm worried about, especially this Sunday.
Michelle, I ran across a phrase which I was taken by the other night, which is that the quality to privilege feels like oppression. And I might maybe add that maybe perhaps unconscious privilege, perhaps. You think that's part of the problem? That those who are more privileged in society, certainly the white end of the spectrum, nonetheless do not feel privileged? I mean, if you're a working guy and you're struggling along, you certainly don't feel privileged. What about that dynamic, that somebody is not conscious of what's going on the other side?
I think that the language that we use, and certainly terms like privilege, that resonate so deeply with some people and really speak to the experience of hopelessness. And for others, it becomes such a buzzword of feeling radically, wildly misunderstood, where people say, but I'm a good person and I'm not, or I grew up poor. There's so many challenges in terms of the language that we utilize right now on social media, in media in general, in conversation, where we tend to, from keyboards, hurl our thoughts at one another or our positions at one another, or when we have conversation, it's with like-minded individuals. And really, part of what I think is that equality, privilege, all of those terms, we've been working for 2 years now on community conversations on race, bringing together, it's small, 20 people at a time. We're on our 5th group, where people are talking about their own experiences and awareness of race, and then slowly coming into larger conversations. It's probably not till the 4th or 5th session that we bring up a term like privilege, because we're trying to really allow space for people to have deep understanding. And I think that there's so much to it. There's so much to it for everyone. And my only sense of how we're going to move forward is if there gets to be some level of shared understanding for where people are coming from.
Do you think, Michelle, that the onset of social media in particular, and its anonymity for that matter, do you think that's intensified this divide or this distance? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the very project I was just talking about, Community Conversations on Race, curiously came about in response to a Facebook Live post. It's like a rant, a sorry, not sorry kind of a piece and then someone from the media reaching out. So I also think that social media can be, I've had people say things, post things, and I've said, this isn't the kind of conversation that I'm going to entertain in this forum, but if you'd like to sit down and get together, I think we have to take responsibility for our communication and the kind of conversations we host and ask ourselves, what are the outcomes we're hoping to achieve? Are we trying to be the big person, splattering it, getting the most likes, or are we trying to really create a shared understanding?
Speaking of new media, one of the things that strikes me is the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And in part, it seems to me, has been sparked by our ability to now see in real time incidents involving the police and African Americans on film, and we can now draw our own conclusions as opposed to something being sort of filed out into like a police report and nobody really knows what's going on. Do you think technology is pulling, making this issue much more aware in terms of the national consciousness?
Definitely so. I think what has happened because of of course we call it the age of technology, social media, more people are aware of what's happening. You could tell someone something, and they may be reluctant to believe what you said. But even when people see things, sometimes subconsciously we see things the way we perceive it to be. And it does not necessarily have to be that way, because we're looking at it out of our own spectrum. But I think because of that, and Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement and all those the movements that are going on in this country, and because of media, more and more people are finding out the actual what is actually going on in this country, and more people are getting involved. Even just, I'm running for House of Delegates, as mentioned earlier. We have a messaging some nights, and 3 or 4 of us get on the telephone and cell phone, not telephone, and talk about different things. We can also what's called Facebook, and shop people, and then you got Facebook, and there's so many ways to get information out. And because of that, more and more people are getting on board to the causes that they believe in. And I think that it is causing some degree of difficulty, because we've got to be open-minded. And Michelle mentioned the word conversation. We have all got to have that difficult conversation, express our feelings, but we've got to come to some type of understanding if we're ever going to change anything in this country. If we constantly button heads, there's always going to be controversy, there's going to be conflict, and no one's going to come to an agreement on basically any issue.
And I think it's, if I might add to that, I think it's not just having difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. I do believe that. I think it's checking ourselves and creating a different level of self-awareness. If we are only talking with the folks who are nodding in agreement with us, there is an inherent danger in that, living in these silos. When we look at this country, when you travel and see there's certain areas, and even in this community right now, and you look at how racially divided neighborhoods are in our community. Names of streets that people of one race know and another do not even know exist. There are, unless there is this coming together, we only move out of polarity and being able to label one another when we become human to one another. And if we're not having conversation with one another and really sharing in one another's everydayness, we lose that opportunity.
Well, one of the flashpoints, it seems to me, over the last few years has been, of course, Confederate monuments, statues, and so on and so forth. Here in Salisbury, of course, we had a great battle over the Confederate general who was memorialized on a plaque. He apparently was actually involved in overseeing the prisons that held Union prisoners. But we also had the Talbot Boys, for instance, a statue there, which there was controversy. That one stayed well. What do you think that symbolizes, KIRKLAND? What do you think that symbolizes in terms of the kind of division that we see? I mean, I've talked to actually a couple of people who supported the idea of having the Talbot Boys, the sign, and they say they don't want us to take away their history. That there's this polarizing sense about it. Does that symbolize the kind of divide you think that exists in this kind of community?
I think it definitely symbolizes the divide, but also what has happened, we pick and choose who want to immortalize Civil War, 1865, and allegedly, I guess unless I have been misled, the North won that battle. So therefore, if the North won, to the victor gets the spoils. But we tend, especially on the shore, immortalize more of the Confederacy as opposed to Northern monuments. Now, if you can help me name me a monument that immortalizes the Northern victors in this area, then I like to see it. But what has happened, the most hideous crowds you can think of, is Wanda, Prison Commodore, and all those people that died. But yet, he becomes a hero. And then I'm finding out there were a number of Northern soldiers who lived for years in this community, and most of us don't know about them. There's no monument with the listing of their names, so that people can be educated that they participated in the Civil War. So again, we pick and choose who we want to immortalize. We pick and choose because it satisfies our own self-gratification that we get, and feel that since that plaque is there, one side think they won. Now the other side is trying to come up with methods and ways to convince them that the sign should not be there. It should be somewhere else. It should be in a museum, which I've stated on numerous occasions. I love museums. There's no problem having it in a museum, but I don't think it should be on public display.
Michelle?
We've facilitated some conversations on these subjects, and with a variety of possible solutions of movement of monuments, of adding additional monuments, and part of what I think has been interesting and noteworthy is the timing of when monuments were placed, and we ask ourselves, with any action, what's the outcome folks are hoping to achieve, and why in particular moments. And so as the civil rights movement increased and gained traction, many Confederate monuments began to appear. And it seemed to be, and I think that's lost on many folks. So there's an additional piece of context. And I've heard folks and supported folks trying to express the importance of history, lest we forget, lest it be repeated. And then I've also gained an appreciation for having a full-bodied context. Like, I've heard a variety of possible solutions. You want to have the monuments there? Put up when it was erected, and perhaps why. Put up additional monuments for people who, like the full story, the full piece. Even when you were talking about technology in policing, and is it helping to increase awareness? Perhaps. But unless we together are processing how what's happening, we can all look at the same piece of footage and see something different, and it can validate our positions. Unless we're engaging with folks and creating a balanced and shared perception, we're not really going to walk away with a full or a complete understanding. I think the same is true with Confederate monuments. Is it creating a full and accurate understanding?
Well, because one of the things you mentioned a moment ago about when these things were put up, a number of them were actually put up during the 1920s and 19-teens, which was the height of the Ku Klux Klan, and a lot of it was in commemoration 50 years after the Civil War and so on and so forth. A much different period in which white supremacists, particularly outright, was being celebrated, certainly in the South and here. So the question becomes, if you try to give a fuller understanding of how these monuments were put up, you're going to wind up telling somebody that, this was put up in support of the Ku Klux Klan. Are you a Klan supporter? I mean, that forces somebody to come to grips with a history that maybe they don't want to come to grips with, Michelle.
I don't think anyone's ever accused me of trying to make it too tidy or candy coating. I think that if we end up providing more information with which to wrestle, it's going to be appropriate, and it probably isn't going to kill us. Probably the only thing that will kill us is what actually does. And I would say there's a far greater danger in our continued ignorance as we're watching things escalate, and as unfortunately things may play out this weekend.
And I think I recall reading that it was a group called, I believe, called the Daughters of Confederacy. I think that was a group who really galvanized this particular activity. And it was also used by others as a method of fear-mongering. With the Klan, who was at its peak during that particular time, you recall they marched on Washington, D.C. And thousands upon thousands marched on Washington, D.C. And again, because individuals knew about the history and knew why the Klan was organized. And now you got the Klan, now you got the monuments and all this other stuff, plaques and monuments and statues coming up. It's a measure of fear, and also it's a method of not forgetting. And who's it benefiting? Those who side with the Confederacy feel that the war's still going on. And people's minds, individual minds, it's still going on.
Let me say this, because one of the things that strikes me is that we certainly have a new awareness about racism and our past. So certainly one of the things we're coming to grips with in terms of the Confederate statues, and that this awareness, which has now come to the surface, is coming into conflict with the past. That people who identify, whether it's with the Confederacy or just white privilege or whatever it happens to be, that we see a couple of great tectonic plates, as it were, in terms of demographics. We all know that by 2040, whites will be, no one will be a majority anymore. Do you think that's part of what we're looking at in terms of this sort of almost whiplash between Barack Obama on the one hand and then Donald Trump on the other? I mean, do you think that's part of this process that will work itself out?
I mentioned a couple of terms earlier, fear and also entitlement. You mentioned 2040. Most researchers say that the demographics of this country will be, the minority will be in the majority. There are individuals who are afraid of that change and ask themselves, what does that mean for me and my family? For instance, on Fox News, the lady Laura Ingraham,
yes.
And the statement that she made yesterday about this country is not the country that we're proud of and will remain proud of based on the changes. And she named a couple of cities that had changed dramatically over the years. To me, as a human being, a person that grew up during the Jim Crow era, a person that experienced riding on the black school, going to a black high school, had to walk on one side of the street, couldn't drink in the water fountain, had to sit up in the balcony of the movie theater, had to go to the back for a sandwich. But still, there's no hate in my heart. I look at that as the sign of the times. And as you continue to grow and mature, I teach my kids and let them know that times are changing. And we got to prepare ourselves for the changes. We can't control it. I don't think we need to control who comes in this country. I'm a firm believer that go back in the content history of it. People come for various reasons. And I'm a firm believer. That's why I went to school. That's why I studied. Because I don't want to do the job that I did as a youth, working in the fields, day in and day out for peanuts. That's why I work so hard in high school. That's why I work hard in grad school. That's why I'm constantly learning. But we got to teach everyone that no one can take something from you. You got to earn what we get. So there's no something that's entitlement anymore. That shouldn't be. If Michelle and I were competing for the same job, the best person should get the job. Not because she's a female, not because I'm African-American male. It's because who's better qualified, who can do that job better. And of course, I know she do a job a lot better than I do, so I want to
Or
apply.
we could revamp the system. We could be co-directors of what. Then perhaps we can just restructure it and start to question some of our systems, designs, and assumptions we make.
Well, Michelle, it does seem to me that I mean, a lot of the focus has now been on immigrants. First, it was undocumented immigrants. Now we had Laura Ingraham talking about legal immigration and so on. How do you deal with the idea that some people look at immigrants in general as a threat? I mean, in fact, I did a piece, I don't know, a number of years back, and I talked to people in the African American community, And one of the things I can't remember who it was who said from the NAACP, and said, well, you know, my heart goes out to these immigrants, but you're killing me because you're taking my jobs. You know, that's I mean, how does one deal with that fear that people have that somehow something's being taken away from them, whether it's immigration or it's affirmative action for that matter? A tough question.
Well, I'm coming back. I keep coming back to the community conversations
Yeah.
on race that we've been having, where folks are saying we need to expand this group. So we've had folks from the Haitian community really needing to have an increase in terms of Latino, Hispanic members of our community as participants, and part of it is about. I think part of it is about when there's a fear about limited resources and the way that we even view our approach. And I think that it's very easy for us to succumb to the labels. And it's exactly like Kirkland was talking about, this piece of, when we were talking about the language that we use and how we approach. I mean, I think that I personally tend to believe that I didn't deserve to be born with any particular citizenship. It happened, and I don't know of any of us, when we trace it back, who
All immigrants.
who would have been here, right? Otherwise, and I think where we are now in these times, it requires all of the pieces. It requires sound, thoughtful, and just legislation. It also, in the day-to-day, requires us showing up in our humanity. Even when I think about the social media conversations we talked about, police footage that we talked about, I mean, all of these pieces, we seem to bypass anything that's sacred. We seem to bypass our humanity. Like we're looking through it in this binary fashion for like playing a blame game rather than recognizing trauma, like someone's brother, father, sister, mother. Like I don't know how it is we're compartmentalizing those pieces, and I feel like that needs to be integrated. I think we need to look at resource management, assuredly. I think that in any of us in our lives, but we need to balance it with our humanity and recognize that people are sacred.
Finally, just a minute that we have left. Kirkland, are you optimistic we're going to get through this period?
Can I go back to one of the things
Sure,
you mentioned about, you talked to NAACP president,
Yeah.
who said that immigrants are coming and taking our jobs.
Right, that was the feeling he had.
Yes,
I mean,
and
it wasn't,
I would ask that individual, as a former NAACP president, what jobs are they taking that you feel you want? Look at the farmers in this country today who are suffering because of having people to work in the fields. Look at individuals in the seafood industry that are on the verge of closing down because they don't have help. So I'm trying to understand what job is it that they are taking that they want. Look at our medical profession. How many immigrants that are medical doctors that may save our lives, may save your lives. So it all depends on what profession you choose. Now, if they want to go back to where it was back in the 60s when we had to work in the fields, well and good. But we need those. I love fruit.
right, but that,
Yeah,
you're
I love
not gonna-
vegetables.
you're not going to go in the field to pick it out, right?
That's it. No,
Unless
but
perhaps
that-
we
that
pay
if I had
people,
to- yeah,
unless
yeah,
we
yeah.
pay people
Be-
differently in the laborers.
$15 an
who
hour.
are-
Well, okay, right. We've been talking with Kirkland Hall. He's the former president of the local NAACP chapter. Also, he's a Democratic candidate for delegate seat in Maryland's District 38A. Also, Michelle Ennis. She's executive director of the Tri-Community Mediation here in Salisbury. Appreciate you taking the time to stop
Thank
by
you
and
for
chat with us.
Thank you. Good morning.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening. There we go.
I am humbled to be on radio with the.
Please! You know what?
I am.
You are
There you go.
ridiculous.
Hey,
Uh-huh.
starstruck.
Oh my goodness! I am.
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, so what a day! What a day! What a day!
So, is that your day planner?
It's not. I just take notes whenever I go somewhere. I still take this.
Where does it take for you to access your calendar? What does that process look like?
Give let me have some
Is
things.
it
What it
down
is.
here?
Is that what it is?
What it is. Yeah.
just thinking. I know that you're like
You had some
taxed,
conversation?
right? Yeah. I know you're taxed right now. I just want to be able to sit down and check in with you,
Okay.
if that's all right. How about next week? Are you going to Mako?
No, I won't be able to make that.
You're so lucky. I'll be there. Okay. How about the week of the 20th? Do you have any time then?
Give me your contact information, and when I get back, I can check my calendar.
Are you parked out back here?
Well, I'm up front,
All right. Yeah.
and I'll get in touch with you.
I have one of my cards, but if I'm in your book, that's probably even better.
Yeah. I'll walk with you just a car too. I'm just I'll walk with you today, so I don't feel
Right.
I'm so.
So alone and
Starstruck.
frigid after all this. Is that what it is? The paparazzi might be out for the two
Yeah,
of
that's right.
us, you think?
That's
Okay.
right.
That's good. That's good. But I certainly appreciate you.
Hey, it's good.
Appreciate
You know. Well, the second half is there's actually some new book about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. I did an interview with, so
okay.
it worked out like.
I saw this breakdown. I'm trying to remember where I saw it because I want to see it. That had markers that were put in the teens and 20s, but then ones that came out in the 60s. And it was, because I had thought it was only at this uprising, like way earlier. And
Right.
so when I saw the list of the others, I was like,
another.
have you seen that?
No,
And I was,
yeah,
Billy,
yeah.
have you seen what I'm talking about?
No,
That you're
I haven't.
listening? It was like arresting, where I'm like,
Well, the thing
it's
with the
really tough not to draw a
1960s
conclusion that it's in like absolute opposition to.
Well, the 1960s. I mean, the thing that people don't. People like say, "Oh, gee, it's the Confederate flag. It's a symbol of a civil." The problem with that is, okay, even if you accept that, which is like a whole nother proposition. The problem is that the Confederate flag and all those symbols were resurrected during the civil rights movement in opposition to civil rights, including the first time putting the symbol on state flags. So if somebody comes along and says, "But
That was part of what was
history,
in
right?
there, yeah.
It's my history." It's like, wait a minute, there are like two pieces of this.
That's right.
No matter what you think about what's going on in the
That's
Civil
right.
War,
That's right.
these symbols were about segregation and racism. There wasn't about something else.
And I hear people say all the time this thing about soon Caucasian folks will be in the minority, and is that part of the reason that there's this upsurge? And I guess I just also I question how much people are paying attention
It's only,
and strategically planning. Or I mean, is it? I don't even know how much there's a shared true awareness of that as a perceived threat.
I agree.
I kind of wish.
yeah.
I mean, I don't wish, in terms of violence, in terms of inequality, in terms of injustice. I don't wish people to be paying attention and then strategically trying to have there be more uprising around race because of that specifically. But I just don't know that I, in general, believe people are that well researched as a.
Look how easy individuals become brainwashed. The Hispanic gentleman in California, older gentleman, 91 years old, was out for his morning walk.
Yeah.
Bumped up against a little girl. The mother grabbed a brick, treated a brick, and started beating on the guy. Then encouraged 4 young African American males to come over to do the same thing. And then finally said, "Why don't you go back to your own country?" Where did you get that from? Then this morning I mentioned about the African American police chief in California. His son is on video beating, what's the term against Sheik? What's it called? What's it?
Sikh, yeah.
Sheik.
Sikh. No H in it. Sikh.
Yeah. Sikh
Yeah.
gentleman kicking him and beating him. And of course he got arrested. And the father was saying, "I didn't teach my son, to do those type of things." To go. So
You got it from somewhere.
So now our young children are attacking other people and other races. And it just bothers me. So I have 2 Hispanic daughters at home. And they had a very difficult time when they first adopted. Kids in school harass them on the bus. And I said, "What you do? You be a good student, you be respectful, and you smile like your dad, and I guarantee you won't have any troubles." Now they're the stars.
Right.
in the school, in the committee, in the program, they always take the lead. And I said, you don't fight bitterness with hatred. No, you don't do that. Treat it with kindness. Treat them with love. Let them know you understand why they feel the way they feel. And you'll find life much better. Now I don't hear that crying when they come home from school. Oh, Daddy, this child's kid said it to me.
Right.
On the bus. I don't hear that anymore. So it's just amazing how things are just, it's just turned around.
I also think that this whole, because we've been doing the community conversations on race, just simple things. Simple things of people. And there are a lot of people who are like, in it, I think I'm a good person.
Like
I'm
simple things.
progressive. Simple things about even like thinking about when you go into a store, are there the products, hair products, body products in general available that you need, like for your like wherever you would travel in the country, right? Do you have access to? Do you have to go to certain specialty spots to be able to find that availability? When people in the news are reporting on people of your race, are the people who are reporting on what's happened of that same race? Like how that starts to come across when we think about like just this piece of like inclusion and diversity. It's not just to check the box to make sure that we're fulfilling some performance measure or
All right,
standard.
college student, take care of them.
Are we actually hearing from one another? I mean, I remember traveling to Tennessee last year
Got it?
to see my daughter, who was working in an incredibly impoverished area of Tennessee, and I was stunned at how almost exclusively white the area was. And when I watched at the flea markets and different sales, the amount of Confederate memorabilia, and then listened to some of the conversations that would happen, and I thought, wow, if you weren't around people who didn't look like you, and you were only told things about them, like kind of like you're talking about, like levels of brainwash, right? Of like certain people, I mean, horrific things that people can be taught and have been taught throughout time and history, and in a variety of ways, right? You got kids of color who are raised like, stay away from white folks, it's only going to be trouble, right? White kids who have been taught like, this is this other breed, this other species, like horrific and absolute, like that piece, like grossly inaccurate. I'm not saying there haven't been white people who haven't been dangerous to children of color. Don't get me wrong, but and I'm just saying that I think that until we get to know one another, like when we think about where we work, who our colleagues are, with whom we go to church or to temple, which grocery stores, when we still have these big dividing lines with neighborhoods, and if we think that that isn't about other opportunities, economic opportunities, educational opportunities, and challenging ourselves. Like, I don't know how we think that we are going to become sensitive and be so detached and removed. There has to be an inclusion
somewhere
for us to be able to create a shared understanding and awareness. Like, Kirkland and I can meet soulfully and deeply and be very fond of one another. And I'm not going to pretend to know what his story and his walk and his experience has been like. Neither can he assume mine.
That's right.
And I don't see a lot of space that we create. If in 2018 I'm helping to host these conversations for community conversations on race with diverse groups of people, all kinds of different ages, all kinds of economic and educational backgrounds, and it is still as overwhelming and kind of riveting for people that they're like sitting with people of the opposite race, having these conversations. And it's not a one-off. It's not like people haven't ever had a conversation about race with someone of the opposite race, but frequently it happens like in a parking lot, following a city council meeting, at a bar, at a holiday party gone wrong where someone's been overserved. You know, there are different spots where it happens, assuredly, right? In a sociology class, right? But to come back together again and again and again, 10 times, 2.5 hours, to sit down and reflect on your own stuff and share it. Create space to hold one another's. If this is like rocket science to people in 2018, what have we been doing with all of our time?
Look at the climate. Like I said, look at the climate that we have now. My uncle died at 96 2 years ago. He was 18. He was in the army in Germany. And he noticed when they came into a town, all the German kids would surround them, looking, looking. And they, I get a, get a flyer. And then I happened to ask the guy, I said, why are these kids following us? They were looking for a tail.
Wow.
Because the kids had been told by the white soldiers that all the black soldiers had tails. So when they came into town, they were looking for tails. So that's why I said that people can be brainwashed so easy. It all depends, like I said, who you associate with. And when you listen to the stories. And they tell you certain thing, and you take it as the gospel. You take it as truth. And I assume they were expecting to see a tail on my uncle and all of his friends that went in the town. And people get upset when I say certain things. And I try to explain to people, violence has no color.
Yeah.
It's a person or individual that's perpetuating that violence. So I'm not in favor of condoning violence on one side and then accepting it on the other side. You use all, and again, I said, I grew up poor. I know it is to be hungry. But I was taught by my father with a 6th grade education who told me what I need to do to get out of that environment. That's why I feel sorry for so many people who in the cities. Because I can plant a garden. I'm a country boy, so you can't plant a garden. I can plant a garden.
I got a little garden.
I got
a little garden.
See, I can plant a garden, and I can survive.
And we have community gardens happening in
but
the
what
city, for the
happened
record.
in a lot of places, they don't know how to survive.
Well, I think
So
that we're the yes, and I think it's also dangerous to do the like bootstrap mentality of if just. I mean, I think there are also systems. I mean, I'm in prison all the time with work, and we're doing, as you well
They banned
know.
me for the prison.
I know they did. We can talk about executive orders and civil liberties, and anyway. And when I'm in there, people can read in the newspaper about mass incarceration. They can take it seriously. They can blow it off. They can write their thesis about it. The experience of being in and day out, of watching one CO, a second CO, a third, a fourth, a lieutenant, a captain suddenly appearing and looking through the window where I'm meeting with a group of 20 folks, and all of a sudden the count is off, and they look concerned, and I turn to the guys and I say, boy, we seem to be attracting a lot of attention today. And it's because my colleague, a man of color, with his back, because we're chairs in a circle, like we are when we're presenting it with the administrative office of the courts, wherever we are, we're doing chairs in a circle, and they said, oh, they see another black head. It's throwing off the count because people cannot fathom that he's going to be part of our team.
I got you.
This very real experience.
Yeah,
we can talk about
yes,
hard work, and yes, absolutely determination and discipline and education, and I absolutely respect how hard not only you've worked, but continue to work. I mean, I had the great pleasure of training Kirkland as a community mediator, and watched him.
All he knows.
Watched him. No, not at all. But I mean, watched his commitment and desire for lifelong learning, and which is so wildly impressive. But I think that there also this piece about justice and access and systems, oppression through systems. It's all of the pieces. It's why it's going to be important to have good folks in office working on legislation, and to have grassroots movement and opportunity for folks to come together. But
and I came from a county whose motto was Simba Edom.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Always the same. See, and you try.
And it's still no. Well, I mean,
we can change.
We
We can change the motto. We can change it all.
What seems it seems to me that we, well, a couple of things. One is that it's all well and good to talk about pulling yourself up in bootstraps and self-initiative and all that sort of thing. And you can tell students that. You say, hey, you know, it's not going to be given to you. You got to, like, hustle to do right. But,
Different direction.
but you're right. There is a system in place, okay, that not only creates all these hurdles. You know, I mean, if you send out the resumes, you know, the whole business about resumes. If one sounds like an African-American name and the other one, like, you know who's going to get called back kind of thing. But there's also the system also imposes limitations on one's vision about oneself and what is expected of oneself. So, you know, if you're in, for instance, the inner city and all you see is one thing,
That's right.
and you're being told, by the way,
That's
you're
right.
not going to get out of this place,
That's
right?
right.
I mean, you're also
That's
being
right.
that, and you don't have to
That's
even
right.
be directly told, right? It's just they're in the ether. It impacts what you're going to do, whether it's, you know, in school or whatever. There's a great study. The only thing I actually appreciated, you know, Charles Murray wrote this book. There's one study that like stands out. In Japan, there is a minority population. It's actually the native population. The Japanese that we know are not native, okay? But this small minority is discriminated against. God knows how they can figure out who's who, but that's what they do, right? If you look at the IQ tests, you find that this little group actually registers much lower, generally speaking, than the majority, okay? When from this minority group comes the United States, and they do the same tests, that difference disappears. Question, why? It's because of how they were treated, the limitations they were expected to have. So it's like, you know, people talk about like IQ tests which have their own like iffy stuff. It's the expectation for people and what they can do, what they can't do, and the limits that are placed on them. And I think that's one of the things that people don't realize, and that's why some of the stuff seems so sticky. You know, it's like, well, you know, we got rid of Jim Crow, we got rid of this, that, and the other thing, so now everything should be great.
But the tape, right? That tape that's running through people's
but
heads
it's
that we
still,
don't
right,
even realize.
Right. And you combine that with the barriers that are already set up.
So speaking of social media, as we have been much, there was that piece that was of research that had gone out, that study where they had the two different baby dolls.
Oh yeah,
Right,
the
the white black
thing,
baby doll, the black baby doll, and like which one was good and which one was bad, and like heartbreaking, like children of color deciding that like
Brown versus Board of Education, they use that.
right,
Use
like
that,
all I
yeah.
mean just horrific, right? And we think about as you listen and teachers within education and talking about disproportionate minority contact or testing scores and looking at, but you can also hear teachers, say, I know right away.
Right.
And there may be merit to, I can see there's a kid who has these incredible study habits and who has, but what it is to meet each kid and help them to learn and grow from that point, like thinking of those pieces. And so I think while we need to work on systems design, like we fought for like a couple of years, we worked towards establishing a partnership with the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services to get into prison and in that, so I don't ever advocate for pieces of legislation, specific candidates. I've shifted. I'm not an advocate. I advocate for dialogue and access to justice in that way. And so it was innovative, right, to head into prisons. And in that, because of the way we work on understanding what people are saying without judging, really radically without judging, listening so deeply, not just because, like, oh, here comes this group who's, like, part of Hug a Thug with, like, rose-colored glasses, right? But, like, because it's their deal. It's their lives and it's important, but we're listening and breaking it down into manageable topics so people can talk about employment, transportation, and that piece of relationships. It reduces recidivism more than, we're saying mass incarceration needs to be addressed, but also relationships matter, even without additional funds for housing, education being poured in, people are able to break that cycle by 24% with 3 2-hour mediation sessions. So there's the piece of balancing just and fair legislation, living wages, all of these pieces,
Right, they're all right.
and
But it's also-
relationships
right, that's
matter.
right. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, yeah, I know.
I'm gonna give you
The alarm. All of a sudden, I saw that.
Yeah, the revolution starts now.